later on, she was like, hey, I am actually teaching this intermediate English to like 10 like adults, grown-ups, and it's going to pay you, instead of $2, it's going to pay you $3. Do you want to try? And I'm like, sure. $3 faster to my MacBook goal. And so I engaged myself in that, and that was very challenging. And of course, she kind of hinted that, hey, let's not talk about your background. Let's pretend that you have some degree in philology and stuff. And I was like, got it. Great. Acting experience too. So here it was, Svetlana, 17-year-old.
Hello, everyone. I am your host, Lion, and I want to remind you that you alone have the power to unlock a life previously unimaginable to you. Please join me as we learn from Svetlana and how she went from a very shy and timid teenager to a badass traveler who hitchhiked across Europe. Someone who went from not being able to speak very much English to someone who currently works at Google. Someone who magically discovered a university program which allowed her to get paid to travel as a digital nomad across several countries while attending university. Come be inspired by Svetlana. Her story is a story of overcoming self-doubt. Her story is a story of how circumstances in her life helped to grow her self-esteem. Her story is a story of finding her voice, and not only finding it, but finding it in a very loud, confident manner to where she, sort of got more in the driver's seat of her life. Today, we're going to talk about how she found the courage to be independent and independently explore the world, all while she was still in university. Looking at my own life, it's taken me so many years to kind of get to this stage, and to have the opportunity to speak with someone who's been able to do it at least 10 years, if not more, before me, I find so exciting. And as a result of that excitement, so honored to be able to share her with you all so that you may be inspired by Svetlana. How does that sound?
Thank you so much. This is beautiful. I appreciate your kind words. It's an honor to be here and share my life and be inspired by you as well. So thank you.
Great. Svetlana, before we get into it, just want to say that originally you were born and raised in Ukraine. You sort of grew up in a family with one other sibling. And before we get into it, or I guess as we get into it, why don't you begin by telling us the story of how you and I met?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. So I moved to San Francisco in the beginning of this year, about 8 months ago. And then for the first 6 months, I've been going to this place called The Center, which is in Lower Haight of San Francisco. It's a beautiful yoga studio, as well as a tea bar, as well as a community space, which organizes also events such as ecstatic dance and or like authentic relating games. And so 6 months after going and doing yoga actively there, I decided to join a volunteer community and actually become a tea bar barista, or they call them TJ. And so now my routine also involves coming to the center on Sunday nights and serving tea for people who are there. And I think during one of the first shifts that I had there, just about a month ago or so, you were doing something on a laptop on right next on the bar next to the tea bar. And I think the center encourages this very welcoming and kind of open atmosphere where saying hi is very simple. And I don't remember who exactly said hi or how exactly the conversation started, but I remember that we clicked right away and started talking about like an interesting summaries of our lives, and that's how we ended up chatting. Yeah.
Yeah, next thing you know it, we're here live in front of the world. And I want to say for those of you who are planning on going to San Francisco, if you're ever in San Francisco, I highly, highly recommend you making the time to check out the Center SF. It's just, there's amazing people all across the world. I think that the Center SF does a very good job of attracting really amazing people. And so if you're new to the city or you're here for some time and want to meet some really cool, awesome people, make the pilgrimage to the Center SF and you will not be disappointed. All right. So with that, Svetlana, why don't you give us some background and tell us a story of how being forced to go to church, in your teenage years, helped cultivate your critical reasoning and thinking skills.
Yeah. So I grew up in a very Christian family where we would go to church every Sunday for 2 hours. And that is usually like a very high effort activity in the family. Because you need to dress up really well. That's an opportunity to showcase how awesome you are. And I'm from a very small town in Western Ukraine, so everyone knows everyone. My parents know priests. My granddad worked at the church, and so for how as long as I remember my childhood, I always was in a church, and standing there for 2 hours praying. The Greek Catholic Church that I was going to, and it doesn't involve a lot of singing or a lot of I think a lot of the churches here in the United States tend to be a lot more engaging or a lot more interactive, versus in Ukraine, the church is usually always, for a kid, it was very, very boring because a kid also didn't understand what the words were about. And so as I went into my perhaps early teens, I started using those 2 hours in church and just wondering thoughts. And I'm like, why am I here? Why do I see grandmas who are poor giving so much money to church? Why do I see the church being so big and grand and rich? Why is there such so much pressure to look good, in front of church, in front of Jesus? What if you don't have money to buy good things and look good? And so I started from just having this 2 hour space to wonder and think in my own mind, because that's what was I don't know, a little bit more interesting than church itself, than the holy ceremony itself. And so after that, I as I was wondering this, it perhaps in when I was 15 years old, I started asking some of those questions to my dad and my mom and my sister, like, hey, what's up? What's going on? Like, can we try to understand why this whole thing defines our purpose of life? And I was just a curious human being, truly trying to understand, because it seemed like such a big thing. And unfortunately, like some of the conversations weren't going very well because my parents are very, very tight to faith, and me as a teenager coming and asking questions seemed to them as if I was giving up on religion, which was not the case. But because they were so tied to the identity of religion, I think that was very difficult for them to see a teenager, me, asking those questions. And so that's, I think, how my wanderings have started. And then the great amplifier of those wandering was having an amazing opportunity to go to United States as an exchange student to Ohio for my junior year of high school. And at that time, my host family, wasn't really having any church routine in their lives. plus I was embraced in a variety of different religions at school. I've seen people who are Jews or who are Muslim or who are not practicing any religion at all, and that almost like opened my eyes at like, wow, there's like different versions of truth in this life, and each of them is valid. And I can choose, and I can think, and I can kind of just wonder, maybe is my religion really like translates and communicates my values that I have inside? And so that was an amplifier. And I think having like that, essentially what the United States at that time gave me is more information and more data almost to think through, right? Because it exposed me to a wider variety of viewpoints. And that was an even greater amplifier of critical thinking at that time.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate what you said about respecting different versions of the truth, because as I understand it, that realization even helped you when you came back to Ukraine to more wholeheartedly accept your parents' views, even though you don't share them, and to be able to accept them in a way where things between you two became much more smooth. Because, as you described it, religion often was a very contentious topic, especially between you and your father. And this was truly a gift for you because of your peace of mind, and your parents and family because you weren't rocking the boat as much.
That is true, but I would say it's actually after I came from the US, which was when I was 17. I came home, and I was even more like rebuttal or whatever that word is to me, who is like, now I know the truth of life. Like, why do we have this? And so, of course, a teenager, a typical classic teenager, so that often resulted in even higher fire conflict in my house. And so because honestly, I was just curious to understand, curious to unpack what is going on. And I think that lasted maybe a year or two, even with periods of my dad not talking to me for 2 weeks because I voiced some questions. And so indeed, there was like quite some tension around, I would say, philosophy / religion conversation. And I haven't yet learned at the time that, again, different people have different truths of life. And that's the realization of that only came perhaps in my early 20s. And especially my last trip to Ukraine, which was just about 8 months ago, when I was 23, that's when it clicked in me that I think it's you what you need is an active listening, and active listening means belief suspension, or disbelief suspension, right? Because once I listen to the version of truth of my dad, I just come with all of those like no, and like my own thoughts. But what if you really actually just sit down and like try to fully understand and immerse yourself in that version of truth and not try to change it? And I feel that's when it clicked to me that love is accepting someone's different truths of life. And I realized that the gift that I can make to my parents is accepting actively their truths of life, and not trying to argue with that. And since then, relationship with my parents have improved so drastically. I do go to church when I'm in Ukraine. I do go to church, and I'm just being silent as to like what are my belief systems. Right now, and that is my dad. I did a confession when I was in January. Throughout 4 weeks, I went to church 7 times. That is, in fact, how can you go to church 7 times in just a span of 4 weeks? I did a confession as well, and so that made my family very, very happy. So I'm glad that I can bring some gift to a table.
Yeah, they probably cherish those memories. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so earlier you mentioned you mentioned the exchange program and coming to the US. So can you tell us the story of how you found out about the exchange program and the process of getting in and just the pure magic of it? Because I think it's such a beautiful story.
Yeah, indeed. It's quite magic. I don't know. Well, I was 17 years old. We're having lots of energy. Or enrolled in Ukrainian university at that time. I was studying economics, and I was very, very inspired by American education system at that time. Spending a year in exchange in Ohio showed me how American education system really teaches you how to think, how to focus on why versus what. Versus, I think a lot of the education that I received in Ukraine was focused on what, being memorization of the facts, instead of trying to make something out of them or form your own opinion. And so I was very inspired by American education system, but I knew for sure that my parents would not be able to afford it, because it's so expensive. And so I enrolled into Ukrainian university. I got like a free ride scholarship there, so education was very free, relatively good. I started studying economics, but also I would say that at that time, university was only taking 30% of my time because I was so heavily involved in other external organizations. I was a kid of high energy, and so I was involved in an organization called, one of the organizations that I was involved in was European Youth Parliament, which is a nonprofit. I think it's the largest nonprofit European organization, volunteering youth organization, which essentially simulates the European Commission and European Parliament, so that kids have, or kids and youth have a better awareness of political, economical, and other types of issues happening in the world. And so I went to Norway for one of the conferences where I was representing Ukrainian delegation. And then on the way back, I extended the trip, and I was traveling from the place where the conference was to Oslo on a bus. And there was this one person sitting right next to me, who was a very handsome guy. And I was a 17-year-old, and I was like, I gotta talk to this guy. And so I went on and I said, and of course, don't want us just to generalize, but Norwegian people tend to not engage too much in a conversation with a stranger. And so at that time, I asked like, I said like, what a beautiful weather, in a hope to start a conversation. And the guy said yes. And I was like, okay, great start. 10 minutes later, I tried again. I'm like, how long does this bus take? Very stupid. Of course, you know the answer, but I was naive, and I just kept asking questions, and that's how we actually then sparked the conversation. And for the rest of the bus ride, we talked, and I learned that he is a founder of the program that I was applying for at that time, which is a startup sort of accelerator for sustainable impact. And that was, wow, what a coincidence, right? Already, what a coincidence to meet someone who is the founder of the program that you're applying for. And then I expressed my reflections on American education system and a little dissatisfaction on Ukrainian education system that I was receiving at that time. And he told me that I would be a great fit for Minerva. And he had people from Minerva take part in his program. And then the bus ride ended, and because I was so inspired by him, and I was so inspired by the conversation we had, I immediately looked up what the fuck is Minerva. And then 5 months later, which then was the application season, I was on my way to travel for the same European Youth Parliament organization conference to Finland, and I was filling in my application. Application was really, really fun. It only took 30 hours. It was not. It didn't cost any money. It did not require any SAT, ACT, because that's a very non-standard school, and it doesn't believe in tests, in standardized tests. And so, yeah, at that time, then I applied for Minerva, not hoping to kind of get in, but then I heard that Minerva has really good financial aid packages, and so perhaps there was still like a little hope and belief that maybe I'll make it. Yeah.
So, thank you so much for sharing, and I especially liked about sort of having the courage to strike up a conversation with a guy you find attractive, and how it just turned into all that and even more. And I hope to sort of come back to it later on in our conversation. At this point, just to clarify, expound a little bit more, I'd love to hear you share the story of the exchange program in Ohio
Yes.
and sort of the story of how you found out about, sort of in high school and coming to Ohio to the half Ukrainian family, and like how that even came into your life and that process.
Yeah, I just read the question. By the
It's
way,
okay.
very helpful UI. Thank you, whoever created this tool. It's great.
It was
Um,
meant to happen that way.
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, so that was a story of Minerva, and but then there is also a story of a Future Leaders Exchange program, which is a highly selective exchange program sponsored by U.S. Department of States, that covers all of the financial needs and just literally takes 200 kids from Ukraine and puts them in different states in the United States so that they can be culturally immersed, so that the United States and Ukraine can have a better relationship after that. And during that year of high school, you as a student, you are hosted by a family, and they provide you with food, and you go to school, and it's all very fun and cool. Well, how I got into this program was actually just that I had I was at school in high school, just like going about my life, and then the English teacher told us, the whole class, hey, there's I have an obligation to share that there is this program testing happening, and if you go do 15-minute test, you'll get a day off school. And I was like, how appealing. Of course, I want to get a day off school. And so I gathered some of my friends. I'm like, this sounds like an awesome drill. Let's go. And we all went and took this 15-minute English test, which was round one of the program application process. And then I went on. We were hanging out, and then later that day, I wasn't even checking the results of the round one because I was so confident that my English skills are insufficient to make it.
Yeah.
I was very high confidence statements on this, so high confidence that I didn't even check the results, and I only found out that I made it to round two when my friend who also got into round two texted me asking me, "Hey Svetlana, how are you getting to the test tomorrow?" And I'm like,
Mm,
test, like I will just walk to my school, like it's like, no, hey, you are in the list of people who made it to round two. um Honestly, that was absolutely truly unbelievable for me, but I was like, okay, since I'm in, let's get the ball rolling. And then I went on the round two, and the round two was now 3 essays that you write in English, usually targeting leadership questions or leadership, or like how who you are as a person. And
yeah.
I honestly, my English was very limiting, and I have access to those essays right now. I don't
Really.
understand what that girl wrote, but thank you, whoever understood it and took time to unpack my messy thoughts at that time. And so I took it around two, and then months later I found out that now I'm the only one from my high school who made it to round three, and I'm like, okay, cool, things seems to be serious. And then I took around three, which was quite a lengthy process, a 5 hour, maybe 5 to 10 hour commitment of now having an interview, now having a long, lengthy application, now having essays, now having references, and all of that. And so as I took it, I was so surprised later, 5 months later, to receive a call from them telling me that I made it to a finalist of the program. That was absolutely unbelievable for me, and I don't think it would ever happen if I wasn't if I didn't want a day off school in the very first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a huge disbelief and doubt in the beginning that I would make it at all. And here I was. I think I was one of the only two people from my hometown who made it to that program that year. And the program was like 2% acceptance rate, and so I I truly couldn't believe, and that was quite a happy moment for me, and quite not unhappy moment for my parents, who were like scared of letting their 15, 16-year-old go to Ohio or some random people and live with them for 10 months. So
I can only imagine. And so then that happens and you somehow, sort of convince them to let you go. And one of the things when we were talking earlier that really resonated with me that I hope that you can share with us is help us understand how challenged you felt with your English while in the US, um, how that colored your life, your everyday interactions in a way where, like you mentioned the story with the golf and your ability to connect with others and make friends. Because I think that that's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kudos to everyone who is listening who is not a native English speaker. I think you're really cool. Please keep going, because it is a huge struggle. I think for someone who who has communicated a different language to now come into environment and just like be immersed in the sounds that are like kind of supposed to mean something, but for you, you're just like not understanding anything. And so I was very, very challenged with English. In fact, the program took me in because of my leadership skills. They made me redo my English test twice because they're like, hey, like, so you have a really good application, but like your English kind of sucks. And so they made me redo the test twice. And they're like, you failed twice, so we will send you to America 2 weeks earlier, so that you can practice your English before you start high school. And I'm like, cool, great, still going to the US, awesome. So my English was really, really bad. And so I went to the US, and then I enrolled myself into a golf team because that's what my host sister was doing. And somehow they accepted me without any experience of golf, of course. And then somehow on day 3 there was already there was already JBs, which is a more junior team competition happening within Ohio, within high schools there. And I somehow was already in that competition. And I was a really clueless kid. There was this moment where, you're in the first hole and you're kicking the ball, and then you're supposed to kick it for like 300, 400 yards. And then everyone is still around because you're just beginning and everyone is waiting for people to like move farther. And then as I was kicking that ball, I only managed to do like half a meter kick of the ball every time. And I did so for 6 times. 6 times. And then on the 6 times, what happened at golf is that you were supposed to pick up the ball and just not do the hole at all. But I didn't know that. I'm telling you, I don't know how they accepted me to the team. I did improve later a lot, but I was, again, clueless teenager. And so everyone around me, but I was on the 6th ball and I was like still kicking, still prepared to like be embarrassed again and again and again. And then they would all start yelling and telling me, pick up the ball, pick up the ball. And I did not know what is pick up is. How funny, right? And so I then my coach came in, which was pretty like, now it was, now the ball was probably around 10 meters away from the hole. So from the start, so kind of like improvement. So she had to walk 10 meters and like, Svetlana, take it. Great. And so that was embarrassing, and it was unpleasant, I would say. And then somehow it happened to be that I was in a host family that was half Ukrainian. That is kind of against the rules of the program, but somehow it happened. And the reasons why they took Ukrainian girl is because they have a Ukrainian sister, my host sister, whose name is Svetlana. They wanted her to learn more Ukrainian. And so, cool, contradictory to what is my purpose for the United States. But as a kind, naive, and, just a teenager, I went on and I lived with that family for a year. So my English was improving, but not fast at all. And then I was taking classes. When I was choosing classes, I didn't even know, for example, what accounting is when I was picking it with the counter. I was like, accounting sounds like a cool word, so I will go on with it. And I took an accounting class, and it ended up being really difficult because I had no clue what's going on. And then I took also musical theater class, which was singing in English, even more difficult. And I also just didn't feel comfortable at all in my English skills. So hence I spent largely the whole year without any friends, besides my host sister, and besides one Russian girl who spoke Russian, and I spoke Russian at the time. So yes. And so I ended up being friendless. I ended up struggling with classes quite a bit, at least in the first few months. And then the family environment wasn't also like the most pleasant. So with all of this, I think there was a moment in time like where I was very, very I don't know if it's a depression, but it's depressive state, or like being very sad as a teenager that this whole thing is happening. And that was even amplified with the realization that I love American education system, but my parents would not be able to afford it. And so, yes, so that the struggle with English was real, and ability to make friends is even more real, because think about it, as a teenager, speaking English and having a group of 5, will you be very interested in unpacking what this weirdo from Ukraine is trying to say you in her really broken English that doesn't even understand you, in a social interaction that is very fast-paced, and in a social interaction that is full of idioms and phrases and like weird texts and stuff? Also, while being 16, 17-year-old, which is a time when it's like a lot of hormones are playing in a school full of 2,000 people. So 2,000 people, no friends. But it taught me, I don't know, a lot, probably. I think, yeah. So it taught me resilience for sure. So that's...
Yeah. And here's the thing, right? Like, hearing you talk, I'm starting to appreciate how severely that year in the US affected your self-esteem, and self-confidence and self-determination. Especially, when we were chatting, you talked about how the journey back home to Ukraine and being surrounded by other Ukrainians who were in the program, and how much they had progressed in their English and their ability to integrate into this American life, and how compared to them you felt so behind. I can only imagine what that must have done to your self-esteem. And I think it's so interesting that despite all of that, when you came back to Ukraine and enrolled in university studying economics, that you would just throw yourself into every opportunity to speak English through your extracurriculars. So consciously choosing extracurriculars where you had to learn more English. So help us understand, tell us a story of how, you persevered and resolved to keep at it despite all of the blows.
Yeah. Oh wow! And to be honest, I'm now being equipped with introspection. I'm very confused what made Svetlana go through all of this. Because in fact, indeed, once I was back, the community of alumni, program alumni, these kind of like very well known people, very like strong leaders now coming back to Ukraine and creating and engaging in all of those cool extracurriculars. And one of the cool extracurriculars was the European Youth Parliament, also like all English, and English talking about politics, economics, and things of that sort. And so quite a high level English. And then and also there were 2 more extracurriculars that were all English based. And I was just, I think perhaps what I felt is that like I felt like I wanted to catch up with with the English level of my alumni peers. And so I felt very confident doing so, but I thought there was something in me, some intuition saying that this is something I have to do. So if I didn't pick up fluency in the United States, perhaps I can pick up fluency now. And also that was already a time when I finally had more agency. The Ukrainian environment was a lot more familiar. My English was still like, it wasn't as good as of my peers from alumni program, but it was better than average teenager at the time. And of course, everything is in a comparison. Unfortunately, our brains tend to analyze all the time, and so perhaps there was a more comfortable position to now finally learn English, because yes, it wasn't as good as of my alumni peers, but at least it was better than average. And so yeah, I think what determined you to throw yourself to continue English is probably something along the lines of just trying to keep up with the peers from alumni program. But also I'm grew to be very curious. So I was taking part in European Youth Parliament was just in itself was a very interesting, intellectually stimulating activity. And I loved meeting people from that program. I think one of the most beautiful memories come from being in that in that organization, European Youth Parliament, as well as being in two other extracurriculars that I was involved, namely Cactus, which is training for youth on informal education and leadership. I was one of the trainers, and then the other one was ISEC, which is an internationally known organization for volunteering as well. So that was very helpful in the fact. But once then, moving on 2 years later, when I got into Minerva and enrolled into Minerva and started my education in America again, I came to San Francisco. For the first full year, I was again, what happened now is that I moved out of the environment where people mostly spoke Ukrainian and my English was still better than average, to the environment of American college, where my English is now again one of the worst ones. And so I think for the first year of my college education, I made some progress in making friends, but it was still mostly a very isolated experience of me just being locked in my study room and trying to keep up with everyone. So.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I find very fascinating and quite entertaining, that I'm, very excited to get into is to give us some background and tell us the story after everything that you just said, how you actually ended up teaching intermediate English to adults in Ukraine, some of whom were almost twice your age and never knew you were actually a 17-year-old. Like, how the hell did you get yourself into that position? And how the hell was it? Tell us more.
Honestly, I'm now thinking about this. Like, who was that person? I don't know. Just like lying to a bunch of adults. Go on, Svetlana. Well, so my first year of Ukrainian college, studying economics, engaging in extracurriculars, doing my university stuff, needing money. Okay, really needing money. I mean, that's just the truth of life. That like you as a student, you need more money than what your parents were able to give you at that time, so that you can have fun. My goal was also to buy a MacBook, which was extremely expensive. MacBook was at that time is I think about 8x of my mom's monthly salary for comparison, and so I started looking for opportunities to engage myself in gigs, and of course I considered barista and stuff of that sort. But then someone told me in my university that, hey, there's like this English school, independent, private, that is looking for a teacher. Perhaps you could try. And it's like, all you have to do is go for like a 1-hour interview that is 10-minute walk away from campus. I'm like, very low effort, of course, let's go. And I went on, and then that lady who was running the school, he like we didn't even have an interview in English as much. All she needed to hear is that I was an alumni from that program. She's like, "You're an alumni from that program," and then she sensed me that like I was a lot more mature than perhaps my peers at the time, and so she kind of like she didn't even ask me my age at the beginning. She only asked age in the end when she already made the decision that she wants to hire me. And so she ended up hiring me, and she was like, let's try these just teaching kids. So I was teaching 6, 7, 8-year-old kids English, alphabet, relatively easy, easier, or maybe actually not as easy, not better, not worse, not easier, not harder, just different, comparing kids versus adults. And so I started teaching kids, six kids after my university every day, and then in real life. And then later on, she was like, "Hey, I am actually teaching this intermediate English to like 10 like adults, grown-ups, and it's going to pay you, instead of $2, it's going to pay you $3. Do you want to try?" And I'm like, sure. $3 faster to my MacBook goal. And so I engaged myself in that, and that was very challenging. And of course, she kind of hinted that, hey, let's not talk about your background. Let's pretend that you have some degree in philology and stuff. And I was like, got it. Great. Acting experience too. So here it was, Svetlana, 17-year-old. I remember, like, honestly, one of the most vivid memories is that I remember that, like, I had this trick that in the beginning of every class, I would put some quote on the whiteboard and try to, like, understand it, like some nice quote from famous good people. And I felt like if you start on a strong note, on a strong, confident note, then they will, like, first impression matters a lot. And so I was like really trying to showcase how I know things and all of that. And plus, again, like my English comparing to like average Ukrainian, still after a year of living in the US was pretty good. And that actually teaching English to those adults, teaching B2 English helped me learn English, because I was doing all the homework and all the things before to prep for the class. And so very fun. After a year later, I met one of my students in a train, and she was like 24-year-old, so 6 years older than me. And we were talking, and I was like, and I was so sure that they knew that I was lying to them. I was so confident. I'm like, throughout the time, like, there's no way they can believe that this 17-year-old is like a grown-up adult. But then, and I was so confident. I was like, hey, like, so yeah, like, what do you know about me? Like, what did you think of my teaching style? And she's like, so good. Everything was really great. I'm like, do you think there was anything weird or like any mismatch that you noticed? And she's like, no, I think it's great. And I'm like, and then I asked her, how old are you? And then she told me 24. And then she asked me back, and I'm like, hey, I'm 18. And she was so in shock that I was that age. So I think it seems like I was pretty good actress. I don't know what other students thought of me, but the one that was the youngest still thought that I was her or older. And so good job to pass the plan. And I did buy MacBook in the end, so great.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Like, what an exciting life to carry on this charade for months, if not a whole year, and to do it so well in a way where people are just have no idea. It speaks to your it's a testament of, like the opportunity that presented itself to you, like the doors that opened, but then also your commitment to fulfilling it, right? And like that experience in itself probably matured you on top of just improving your English as well. Okay, so earlier, you were telling us about how you found the courage to strike up a conversation with this cute Norwegian guy on a bus, and how that whole interaction, though is motivated
for one reason, ended up being so magical because he was the founder of a program that, you were applying to, all meeting somebody random on a public transport in a completely different country. And then how he introduced you to Minerva University. And today's episode, besides getting to know you, is about your experience as a digital nomad through university, right? So help us understand, once, this guy tells you about it, and you mentioned earlier about the putting in the time to apply. One of the things that really struck me, and I'm hoping you can expound on it, tell us more about the process of getting into Minerva, and how selective, how difficult it actually was, and you didn't know all of that going into it, right? So help paint us a picture of, how selective it was, and then going through those different stages.
Yeah. So yeah, as I earlier told that, like, I met this cute guy who told me about Minerva, super inspired. Applied five months later. Sent an application because it was 30 hours of time. And honestly, by that time, I was actually in that kind of like vibe of like, hey, it seems like so far you've been just applying for random things and you've been making it. So maybe you just like keep just sending random applications. And so I was like, my other activity outside of university and extracurriculars was like just applying. There was this website that was showcasing all the opportunities around the world. I don't remember what it is. It's probably still live, but volunteering opportunities, traveling opportunities, like conference opportunities. There was this website, and then I was just like, my thing was just like sending applications, and I was writing essays and I was applying. And then one of those things was Minerva, and I was like, I didn't really study much what that is, but of course I was so inspired by this guy that I sent my application, and it was 30 hours of work while traveling to Finland in a bus, in like coffee shops, in pizza places. And I was not aware when I was applying, I was not aware that the acceptance rate, as they say, per website is about 2% for that program as well. And so I think ignorance in this case was bliss, because if I was aware of that, I probably would not have applied at all. But the application was very fun. I didn't know how selective it is, and I did not know. I didn't know a lot of basics about this school. Like, I heard that there is some traveling involved, but I was not aware that some traveling means changing countries every month or every semester. It didn't click this, that's a requirement. I was like, some traveling, American school. That my primary reason was like, it's American school, hence like good education, hopefully. And B, I heard that they give full ride financial aids for those who make it. And so I applied as those being two primary drivers, and they also didn't need any tests, so that was delightful. And I applied, and I made it in, and was again very, very surprised, and was very, very happy. And later, when I got in, then I studied their website, and I was like, what, like India, Korea, Germany, and London, and Taipei, and San Francisco, and Buenos Aires mandatory. You travel as a cohort every semester. And I learned it literally on a day when I got my acceptance letter, which is a digital acceptance letter. And then I looked into the website, and I was like, really shocked that this is a requirement. And then I then met my dad 2 hours later, and he was asking me like, what is the school? He didn't know that I was applying. No one knew that I was applying. No one knew what's going on. And he asked me like, so like, what is the school? Give me a gist. And I'm like, yeah, so it's school, and it has some traveling. And I wasn't even able to tell what countries it was traveling to. I'm like, yeah, I think there's India. And my dad was like, the India? So I really didn't study that much. Please don't take away my diploma because of the bad preparation. I made up for it. I was a very good student. So, but yes, please, if they knew it, they probably wouldn't accept me as happily. Or maybe that's just what they like. The question they were asking were focused on the personality. So yeah, that's how I got into that university. And they offered they were covering 94% of my financial needs and like whatever needed to be paid. And so the remaining was still possible for my parents to cover, at least for the first year of school. And so good news. I ended up then 8 months later or so, I ended up going to San Francisco, and that was great start of interesting life. An interesting chapter of life.
I can only imagine. And so, help us understand a little bit more about how this whole alternative education system is structured. So one of the things that, stuck out to me is that you mentioned that there's only 150 people in your entire class, but 51 different countries represented, right? So can you comment more on sort of the makeup of the people that you went to this cohort with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think people is probably the best part of that program. So it's an alternative school founded in 2014. I was fourth graduating class, and huge kudos to 3 previous graduating classes for like taking a risk and courage to actually go for this alternative school that only had a website at that time. And the interesting fact about our school is that we have this motto, "City as a campus," and what that means is that we have no actual physical campus. How does it work then? Hey, how do you study? Well, the university or its for-profit part has built a platform that is extremely advanced platform for education, for you to learn and to study. And they build it with an intention and with a clear, like science-backed premises that this is the best way to learn. And that is because when you are in, like when you have a computer, you can mold an environment as much as you want. And for example, there is no people who sit on the back row. There is everyone visible on the same screen. And there is tools like the teacher, the professor, they can see who speaks a lot, right? You can do the speaking distribution during the call, during the class in live, synchronously, and there was also a huge culture of cold calling encouraged. And because education or primary classes were done online, that implied that they could hire professors who, like, for example, work in Arizona researching some things in NASA. Like that was one of my professors, who didn't have to be tied to location to still teach to great students. The other professors that I had was like a director of impact evaluation at World Bank, Professor Diamond, whom I respect a lot. He has written a very popular paper on genetic matching and data science. So all this to say that digital education, I think it's very cool to check it out if anyone of you is in education, how exactly Minerva is structured in terms of like performing education. But again, this aside, because I think the best part about this education was people with whom I went to the school. And so the cohort is extremely diverse. This was an American school, but only 8 Americans were in my class. The class is 150 people, and there were 51 countries represented in the class. And those were people, because again, good financial aid, those were people from really diverse backgrounds, across social income status, across demographics, across race, across belief systems. I even had, for example, one of my classmates, like one of the first interactions we had, he explained to me that he cannot touch women, females, even for a hug. And so in communicating with him, you have to be careful to not accidentally have a touch, which is very, very, I've never heard of anything like this. There are also classmates who even had, arranged marriages back home in Kenya. And so very, very diverse crew of people. And with those people, with those 150 people, which is, by the way, also known, 150 is known as the Dunbar's number, which is a number that, which is a study, there was a study that suggests 150 people is the size of a tribe that Homo sapiens used to have. And that's the number of people that you can know intimately in your life. Like, that's how many friends you can know throughout life. And so they base this number so that, hey, you come to this uni and you know everyone's hopes, dreams, expectations, fears, and all the other things. Of course, that's like an intention. What is the reality is far from ideal, but close to it, but closer than comparing to other schools. And so these also 50 people from 50 countries, we were traveling together to some countries, or like actually less than that because of COVID intervention. And studying together. So that's what's the makeup of my 5 closest friends right now, even 10 closest friends right now, probably are all from different countries. It's an incredible luck and privilege to have an opportunity to form my opinions while conversing with people who had different choices of life and still have different choices of life. So I'm very, very lucky in that sense. And I think all Minerva students, I hope, appreciate this opportunity to learn from people from diverse backgrounds.
Hell yeah. Can you tell us again what the countries where this program took place were?
Yeah, so originally there was a different mix, but because of COVID intervention, my path was San Francisco, Korea, India, UK, Brazil, Brazil was my own endeavor. So there wasn't people coming with me, not 150, but only my friends, because again, COVID, usually they would never allow that. And then London again, and then London again, and then what did I miss? Brazil, London, and Berlin. Did I mention Berlin, Germany?
No, you just mentioned it now. Okay, great. And earlier you mentioned cold calling.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
It's like a trick of our university. It's like that's like a spicy sauce. I think that they like to do. Professors are taught to do. They cold call on you. So they have also it's the education is structured in like seminars. Like there are no lectures. There are no lectures. No tests. There's only projects.
There's no tests.
No tests. Like I've never taken a test. Like the last time I took tests was like for driving something, and so no tests, only cold calling and seminar based, because they want students. They don't want students to give answer to students. They want students to come up with an answer on their own. And so they, throughout the class, they would ask questions and then they would cold call because that's how you keep people's attention. Like you, of course, I think it's quite fear driven. And what is interesting about all of this is that your response during the class is graded. Quite some pressures. It was so much pressure. Oh my gosh, this was intense. This was very intense. Academically, the time at Minerva was really, really intense. And so because again, they can record. Technology expands on reality. And so you can record the classes and the professor would go and listen to your response. And then it was cold calling, so I could randomly be asked about some question, if you didn't pay attention. And oftentimes the cold calling would involve basing on other students' response, what they just said. How do you think like emerging properties can be formed in societal structure? And then you would have to, based off someone's response who is from the other country and you maybe not haven't heard them or haven't understood their accent. So it was, and then you would try to give a response, and then the response is oftentimes graded, so they would grade response in the class, and that's either your speech or a little writing that you do in the beginning of the class and in the end of the class. So they have a task, like a little, it's not a task, it's a question, like asking about the class content, making you solve some problem if it's a mathematics. So fun stuff. For a lot of cold calling, a lot of stressful environment. That continues throughout the school. They started the first year was very, very especially active on cold calling. And of course, later on, it's like depends on professors, but because they all know that we are like cold calling is now in our nature. They loved cold calling. It's like joy to cold call. I imagine for professors it might be so much fun to like I don't know, just pick and they would cold call based on, again, talk time. Remember, technology expense, and so they would have a list of students, and they see that Svetlana did not talk this class. She talked the least, right? Cold call.
Wow. So, we talked about sort of this alternative way of just engaging in education. We also talked about 51 different countries being represented. And you also shared how you didn't really undergo tests, and most of it was project based. And I'm guessing a lot of it was collaborative in nature, right? So help us understand your experience of collaborating, on projects for school where there are so many different experiences, cultures, upbringings, ideologies. Talk to us about what that was like for you, and some of the challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's a very good question. So I think, well, besides classes, students also had a requirement to engage in mini internships in their cities. And what this means is that university would go and form partnerships with private or for nonprofit companies and universities, and students would form a team of 4 to 5 people, or perhaps sometimes individually would take part and then perform those projects together as a team and deliver something for that. Of course, very much unpaid, but it's a great learning opportunity, as they say. And so I think the first project, and I'm trying to think of a great example, because there were so many little subtle things that you have to just think through. But like the first project I engaged in was being supervised by a Googler who was ex-NASA, and we were coming up with a technological way to help kids learn about astronomy and space and NASA operations. And my team was a guy from Kenya and a girl from Vietnam and me from Ukraine. So that was a team makeup. And even already in that time, I remember structuring the meetings, understanding how do you go about leadership in the team, right? Who takes role to pitch, or how do you essentially all the kind of logistical questions and socialization even was a question mark, because maybe in context of performing intellectually, maybe it wasn't as apparent, because in intellectual questions all you have is like a common base knowledge of like what is NASA, what is astronomy, and you use knowledge to kind of think about this. So, but I think more apparent the diversity was in social settings, where everyone was coming with a different understanding of what the college is. There were some people from certain countries where they would expect this like huge hookup and fraternity like culture that their friends from high school have, and then there were people from countries where you don't touch each other, or you don't touch females. And so I think the social settings, for example, of like romantic and sexual settings, were quite messy and quite hard to figure out, because there is no majority culture involved. And what that means is that there is no template that you can copy and paste into this interaction. And so, because oftentimes we have all those like hidden rules inside of our minds of how things should go, and how you go about like talking to someone. Do you hug them or do you not? Do you smile? Do you keep an eye contact? All of this is on a subconscious level wired, but never spoken out. But when you bring people from different backgrounds and different like cultures, and when there is no majority culture to copy paste and template from, what you are forced to do is you're forced to come up with your own way of living as a group. And I think and of course that is I know that was kind of an ideal case scenario that like you would have a lot of diversity people in groups, and social groups would start appearing that are like very diverse. But I also noticed that in my class, a lot of people were forming groups based on their home culture, or like based on cultures that are a little bit closer. Like, for example, there was a Christian group. There was people who were like all the same race, and that's because we humans, we need familiarity. Like, it's the college itself is already stressful. So, but still, there was a lot of diversity. It's just, it was also challenging to come up with your own template of thinking and going about social situations, going about forming friendships, going about expressing yourself straightforwardly, as we do in my home country, versus hiding the truths behind layers that are not even decipherable for someone who is from a straightforward culture. And so definitely made me grow a lot. With just trying, again, I think it's all about this active listening, trying to understand what is this person take on life, and like trying to not force your own opinion, but actually co-live with this and co-vibe with this and find something that would be good for both of you, right? It's not you win, I lose. It's more of like we both win and we both come up with a diversity of ideas and all the emerging innovative stuff that comes out of that interaction. So I think now I'm a very deep. I'm trying to think deeply for myself in any interactions I have, and like try to question any assumptions that happen in any communities. So that's huge thanks to that exposure to diversity when I was at Minerva or outside of it.
Thank you. And what I'm hearing basically is that, when you're forced in a situation to collaborate with such different personas and ideologies, that you have no choice but to sort of take it all in through active listening, and then find compromise in a way where you're sort of honoring each of the different perspectives and experience. And as we become more and more global as a human race, there's this value of pluralism, that starts to become more front and center. And this goes back to, one of our earlier points about different versions of the truth, and, different perspectives on getting the same, result, or solving the same issue, and how you can, as challenging as it might be, come up with a solution that tries to take into account the voice of each unique perspective, especially in diverse societies like we have in the US, Canada, other places. Really everywhere there's diversity, right? But in these places there's even more. And I think your university was so extreme in that regard, like almost to break you, to sort of create this new version of you that can thrive in a more normal situation, right? So talking on the theme of things that break you, part of what's entailed in being a digital nomad is traveling. And so far we've talked about just, working across different cultures. But help us understand, how challenging was it for you, mentally? And also, how exciting was it for you to be in a new environment, a new culture every semester?
Yeah, well, indeed, extremely exciting, very much. But also, it would have been even more exciting if I didn't have to study like 13, 16 hours per day. But that is okay. That's what college is for, right? In terms of, I think perhaps to start with the challenging part, I think the challenging part could be easily seen by, I've been tracking my weight for like last many years, including Minerva, and you could see how coming into a city in the beginning, there would always be a huge drop in my weight. And that is because, an example is, when I came to Korea, which was my second rotation city, I came from traveling 2 weeks before Korea in Vietnam, visiting my Minerva classmates' families who were. Vietnam is very based on rice culture, and so there's rice wine, rice cakes, rice breakfast, rice lunch, and of course rice dinner, and it's all rice. Great, but I'm not used to having so much rice. But because I was hosted by families, I was eating rice and respecting and appreciating it. But by 2 weeks, I was like feeling heavy and feeling very, very unwell because of how unusual all of this is. And so when I came to Korea, I was very excited to finally find my own food and eat on my own. And then I came to a store, and from the grain sections, I really just saw rice plus a bunch of unknown things that I had no clue about. I saw this thing called tofu, which I've never heard of. I was like, great, so what is that? They eat tofu. I saw unknown mushrooms. I was like, great. And so for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks in Korea, I was just eating what I knew, which was yogurts. I would just get yogurts and I would eat yogurts, and that's how my weight would drop. And then with time, I found a great alternative, like for my food in Korea. Every day, I was eating black rice with mushrooms. Black rice was a little bit lighter, and once I figured out that they have black rice, I got like 10 kilograms of rice, and I was just eating rice for the rest of semester. And then my weight would go up because as a student, you don't have access to a lot of money, and therefore you are eating unhealthy. For example, frying rice with mushrooms. That was my thing, and that is unhealthy. And so, and you could see throughout my Minerva journey how in the beginning of the city, I would usually lose weight, and then in the end, I would gain weight, a lot of weight. And that is because also because of like how challenging academically it was, and in the end, you always have like a lot of deadlines, and so I was also eating a lot of sweets. So many challenges. And this is just, if you think about college, a lot of people don't have to think much on like what you eat on a daily basis. They have a cafeterias, or at least they have known grocery stores. I think a lot of people in my class, and me including, we struggled a lot with finding food and understanding how to eat. Like cooking on top of education was very challenging, and most of us also didn't have much money or at all, and being on a tight budget and navigating Korean grocery stores that has no English. I didn't even have any dietary restrictions, but I imagine for those who did, that might have been even 10x of a challenge. And so huge respect to them. But those basic of figuring out what to eat, where to do laundry, what kind of buses you take, what kind of people you meet, how do you navigate, I don't know, tuk-tuks in India. All of these are questions, huge questions, and that you had to figure out on top of the education itself. And so that was indeed very challenging, and definitely Minerva is not for everyone. I think you mentioned how, Minerva made you more resilient and stronger, and like it's all really cool and beautiful. But also I think it is important to mention that like a lot of people weren't feeling good during Minerva time because they had mental health struggles, me including. A lot of people had problems with food. A lot of people had problems with movement, and a lot of problems. My thing was sleeping 5 hours per day on consistent basis. It's like I've been tracking my sleep for about 2 years of my university. I cannot believe that this was happening, but this is extremely unhealthy for an individual. And so that was massive challenge, physiological and emotional. But speaking of exciting parts, a lot of exciting parts from traveling and living in different cultures. Like my first product management internship, which is what I'm doing right now. But first product management experience was in India. I was working at a small startup that was 5-minute walk away. I was for the first time immersed into working with people of a totally different culture, with only Indians, right? So that now they are a majority culture. So now they define a template of how things works. And that was fascinating. I was just very, had a huge pleasure to understand how to collaborate with people of that culture, and as well as just traveling and living in London was such a pleasant experience as well. Like learning from, they have a huge bar rolling culture, and at the time I was already past drinking age, so getting to know the culture, getting to know biking culture in Germany. So many beautiful memories from that time. And also doing those projects with people, with companies. Like in Korea, I did the data science project with a Korean bakery, and that was such a fun learning opportunity. So definitely lots of fun stuff, but also lots of struggle. So yeah.
Okay. One of the last questions before we wrap up for today, I remember, when you're going to a new place that you've never been before, of course, as busy as you might be, you want to take some time out to travel and explore where you are, because who knows if you'll ever be there again, right? And I remember in the lead up to today's call, you were sharing experiences on going to school in India and how tricky it was to travel there and manage school while you're traveling. Could you share a bit more about that experience in India or somewhere else? Whatever comes to mind, because ultimately, as a digital nomad, you're not just staying put in one place. You actually want to still explore on top of living your life. And a lot of people, we don't realize that's where it can get more challenging and how much you decide you want to try to explore. So help us appreciate, how tricky it was and through your eyes.
So what is cool about this school is that classes are online. You technically have visa to be in the country, like especially for those who are not from like Europe. They got like European Union Schengen visa, hence open to all countries of that region. And so I've noticed non-Europeans traveling a lot when they were in Europe. Not me as much because I'm from Ukraine, so I well traveled there. But people, when you have online classes and when you have some bit of time management, you can arrange things in a way that allow you for traveling while you are in the city. And so people oftentimes would take those 2-3 weeks or a few days trips to cities nearby, countries nearby to explore. And a lot of like me including, for example, before going to Korea, I was like, hey, Vietnam and Japan are kind of on the way, so I will stop by. I stopped by for like 3 weeks in total, so quite a lengthy period of time. And then when I was in India, I was also like, India is so cool, dang, like there's so much to explore. And so a few of my friends and I, we just organized like a couple of week trip to Mumbai and Goa, and that was really fun as well. But this was fun, but also at the same time with financial constraints of student budget that was very tight. And then also in India, I remember a huge struggle was while traveling. The internet coverage is not the best in some of the regions where we went to, and so that implied that and our platform really needs a good internet coverage to pull up all the information about all the students. And so that meant that taking classes, sometimes we would have skip classes, which is not good. We only have a limited amount of those that we can take, and so it's a kind of a time management play that you gotta play here as a student, and also you can choose to do it or you can choose not to do it. And so I was there were places in which I traveled a lot. In Korea, I traveled to an island called Jeju, which was beautiful. And then there were places in which I didn't travel much, such as Europe, London, and Berlin. I was just not too interested in going to the countries that I've already been to. And then there were places like Brazil that was my own assembled group of friends, 5 of us, just going and spending 1 month in each other's house, family house. So because I somehow managed to have a lot of Brazilian friends in the end. Somehow Ukrainians and Brazilians just vibe. My closest friend is Brazilian and my ex is Brazilian, and so I went there and we spent like as a group of 5. Because it was COVID, we were allowed to do that. Otherwise we would have to be in Argentina or Taipei, which were cancelled. And so we went and we spent months in like family of one friend, months in a family of another friend, once in a family of another friend. And that was a semester. One of the semesters I had was just traveling throughout Brazil and changing cities all the time. And that was a very awesome experience. Like if you ever have a chance to be hosted by some family, do so. You will learn different definitions of love and different definitions of how things should work in a family context, because so many of our experiences only have one data point, like one sample of how things work. Like you grew up in only one family, so therefore you only know how things work from one experience, or you have media that portrays it very unrealistic expectations. And so I think that was a huge beautiful part of my experience as well, which I massively appreciate, having a chance to travel while also being at the school.
Wow. I think that is such a powerful note to end today's great discourse. I want to sort of reiterate for our audience sort of what you said about, seeking out opportunities for a homestay, ideally in a different culture where you can be exposed to, different definitions of love and togetherness and coexisting to broaden your own horizon, especially, because each of us in the family that we grew up or wherever we grew up were exposed to things that were less than ideal, and being exposed in such an intimate way when you live with someone to sort of how that living occurs can be so powerful for our healing, especially if, we've been through some less than ideal situations growing up. So that's such a powerful message to end today's amazing conversation on. Thank you so much, Svetlana. Before we close, is there any last words that you would like to share?
Yes, I want to thank True Host. I think Lion does an amazing job at having this exact active listening that I was saying, of truly hearing what you're saying. And I hope that an audience enjoys your presence as well and the effort that you're making. So thank you so much for this. And I hope people can get inspired from how you lead a conversation, how thoughtful you are. So thank you for this. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a very beautiful day, and stay cool.
Stay cool and keep exploring. All right, Svetlana, on that note, thank you. And to our audience, today's episode was amazing, magical. I hope that you were able to glean lots from it, especially if you're a student in middle school, high school, wherever, or if you know students, right? Because being a student is not easy, and those years are in some regards, are some of the toughest years, especially in this competitive landscape that we live in. And so I hope you were able to fill your cup with today's episode. And until the next episode, I wish you love and light. Lion over and out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Get Out of Your Comfort Zone series. I hope it moved you and inspired you if you are feeling stuck with something in your life. If you would like to further connect with our guest, please see their contact in the description. Please consider taking a moment to rate this podcast. Please also consider showing us some love on your Instagram story. You can find our info in the episode description. Until the next episode, I wish you infinite love and light. Thank you so much for tuning in.